The moment shattered like glass across the tasting room. 20 faces froze mid-bite, forks suspended in air as Viveca's voice sliced through the reverent silence that usually accompanied our weekly cheese evaluations. "These are trash," she screamed, her manicured fingers gripping my aging reports before hurling them directly at my face. I didn't flinch, not when the papers struck my cheek, not when they scattered across the polished concrete floor, not even when the rush of blood to my face betrayed the composure I fought desperately to maintain. The cheese wheels on the table, products of my 3 years of relentless experimentation, sat forgotten as every eye in the room locked onto my public execution. "Months of work," Viveca continued, her voice dripping with theatrical disappointment. "And you bring me this amateur garbage? These aging profiles are inconsistent. The humidity fluctuation data makes no sense. And these flavor development notes read like they were written by a first-year student." My colleagues stared at their shoes, their laps, the ceiling, anywhere but at me. Nobody moved to help collect the scattered pages of my life's work. "I expected better from someone with your background," she continued, her voice lowering to something more dangerous. "Perhaps I overestimated your capabilities." The silence stretched as my research, the innovative technique combining traditional cave aging with precisely calibrated humidity fluctuations, lay condemned on the floor around me. 3 years of 4 a.m. starts, weekends sacrificed, holidays missed, all dismissed in 10 humiliating seconds. I bent down slowly, my fingers trembling slightly, as I collected a single sheet from the scattered pile. Not randomly. This particular page contained something Viveca hadn't bothered to read: microbial analysis comparing my control batch to a mysteriously altered sample. I folded it carefully, slipped it into my pocket, and walked out without a word. Behind me, Viveca's voice resumed the meeting as if nothing had happened. "Now, let's discuss my upcoming presentation at the International Artisan Cheese Guild." The hallway stretched before me, but I moved with purpose despite the hollow feeling spreading through my chest. Tucked in my pocket was the key to understanding what had really happened to my samples. I just needed time to process it. "Nora," a whispered voice followed me. Petra, my lab assistant, hurried after me, her eyes wide with concern. "She's flying to Lyon tomorrow. The guild invited her as keynote speaker at the Fromage Festival. She's presenting your techniques as her own research." I stopped walking, the final piece clicking into place. "By noon," Petra added, glancing nervously back toward the tasting room. "She'll have everything prepared for her grand reveal on the international stage." Wait, if you're still listening this, I need you to hit that like button right now because what happened next changed everything in ways I never imagined. Subscribe to hear more stories like mine, because trust me, what I did next might just give you the courage to stand up when someone tries to push you down. Drop a comment if you've ever had your work stolen. You're not alone. My name is Nora Bellamy, and until that morning, I was the lead aging specialist at Blue Summit, one of the most prestigious artisanal cheese aging facilities in North America. I held a master's degree in food chemistry and had turned down positions at major food science laboratories to pursue my passion for cheese. Not the mass-produced blocks shrink-wrapped in supermarkets, but living, breathing wheels of art that transformed over time under the right conditions. I was quiet, methodical, the person who stayed latest and arrived earliest. While others saw cheese aging as tradition bound by unchangeable ancient rules, I saw it as a science waiting for innovation. My research into humidity fluctuation patterns had started as a hunch, then evolved into a breakthrough that could revolutionize how small artisan producers competed with industrial operations. Viveca Landon had been appointed director 2 years after I started. With her sleek wardrobe and media-trained smile, she became the face of Blue Summit, while knowing surprisingly little about the actual science behind what we did. But she understood power, how to claim it, wield it, and protect it. Our relationship had been professional, if distant, until 6 months ago when my name started appearing in specialized industry publications. Cheesemakers were asking for me specifically when they visited. That's when things changed. First came the increased scrutiny of my work. Then deadlines moved up without notice. My lab access became restricted to business hours only, eliminating the evening experimentation time I cherished. Each change came with a smile and a reasonable-sounding explanation. "We need to standardize access procedures, nothing personal." But it was personal. I knew it the day I overheard her on a call, voice animated with pride. "Yes, my revolutionary aging technique is why our blue takes half the time and tastes twice as complex. My technique, my research, my life's work." I should have confronted her then, but I hesitated, doubting myself in the face of her authority. Instead, I doubled my efforts, meticulously tracking my experiments and keeping detailed notes at home, creating a parallel record of my innovations. Yesterday, I'd submitted comprehensive information about my latest breakthrough, a refined method that would transform aging times while enhancing flavor complexity. I'd hoped that by presenting irrefutable success, I'd finally receive recognition. Instead, I got papers thrown at my face. After Petra's warning, I retreated to my tiny office and examined the paper I'd saved. The microbial analysis showed subtle but definitive tampering. Someone had introduced competing cultures into my test batches, disrupting my carefully controlled environments. The dates, times, and batch numbers pointed to only one possibility. Viveca had been systematically sabotaging my work. The question was why. The answer came when I looked at my calendar. The International Artisan Cheese Guild meeting, the most prestigious gathering in our industry, started tomorrow in Lyon, France. Viveca's keynote address was scheduled as the opening presentation, where she would unveil her groundbreaking aging techniques. I stared at my computer as notifications began appearing on the Guild's website. Revolutionary aging techniques revealed. Viveca Landon's keynote not to be missed. My hands trembled as rage and helplessness fought for dominance. What could I possibly do? She was leaving in less than 24 hours to take credit for my life's work on the global stage. By the time anyone realized the truth, my innovations would forever bear her name. My phone buzzed with a text from Petra. She's booked at Le Royal Hotel. 5-star, 2 weeks, combining the speech with her annual vacation. Says she deserves it after all her hard work. Something inside me hardened. I would not let this stand. Not this time. I gathered my things and walked out of Blue Summit without another word, the beginnings of a plan taking shape in my mind. As the glass doors closed behind me, I had no idea if I'd ever walk through them again. What I did know was that Viveca's carefully orchestrated triumph was about to unravel, along with everything else she thought she could take from me. That evening, I drove 2 hours through pouring rain to reach my former professor's home. Dr. Eleanor Reyes had been my mentor throughout graduate school and now headed the dairy sciences department at the university. If anyone could help me make sense of this situation, it would be her. Eleanor answered her door in reading glasses and a worn sweater, surprise crossing her face. "Nora, what brings you here so late?" "I need your help," I said, water dripping from my hair onto her welcome mat. "Everything I've worked for is about to be stolen." Inside her warm kitchen, I spread my evidence across her dining table, the microbial analysis showing tampering, my original research notes, and printouts of Viveca's Guild presentation abstract that mirrored my methodology almost word for word. Eleanor examined each page meticulously, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When she reached the tampered sample data, her expression darkened. "These modifications to traditional aging, they're brilliant, Nora," she said, examining my charts. "And you have irrefutable evidence she's sabotaging your work?" "Yes," I said, my voice smaller than I intended. "But what can I do? She leaves tomorrow morning. By the time I could pursue any official channels, she'll have presented my research to the entire industry as her own." Eleanor leaned back in her chair, removing her glasses. "The Guild's current president was my doctoral student. Antonio and I still speak regularly." My heartbeat quickened. "You know him personally?" "Know him?" I wrote his recommendation letter when he applied for the position. She reached for her phone. "One call from me will put your evidence directly into his hands. What happens next will be up to him. But Antonio has always valued intellectual honesty above all else. Will he even have time to review everything before tomorrow's presentation?" Eleanor's eyes gleamed with determination. "Nora, when someone tries to steal a breakthrough like yours, finding time is never the issue." While Eleanor made her call in the next room, I sat staring at my scattered research. Years of dedication spread across a table, nearly taken from me in an instant. The injustice of it burned in my chest. Eleanor returned 30 minutes later, her expression grave but satisfied. "Antonio will personally review everything tonight. He's postponing his dinner with the Guild board to go through your documentation." "And if he believes me?" I asked. "Then Viveca will have some very uncomfortable questions to answer before she takes that stage," Eleanor said. "He's promised to call me by morning with his decision." That night, I barely slept on Eleanor's guest bed, checking my phone obsessively. At 5:17 a.m., Eleanor knocked on my door, fully dressed and holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Antonio called." He spent half the night verifying your documentation against what Viveca submitted to the guild. Eleanor handed me a mug. He said the similarities are beyond coincidental. They're unmistakable. What happens now? The guild takes academic integrity seriously. Antonio has sent a formal inquiry to Viveca, requiring immediate clarification about the origins of her research. She'll need to address these apparent inconsistencies before being allowed to present. Relief washed over me, followed quickly by anxiety. She'll blame me, say I'm jealous or trying to sabotage her. She might, Eleanor agreed, but the evidence speaks for itself. Your dated notes, the progression of your research, the tampered samples, it creates a compelling timeline. And Antonio mentioned something else that might interest you. What's that? Several small-batch producers have been implementing early versions of your techniques based on your previous publications. They've documented their results independently. Their experiences align perfectly with your research findings, not with Viveca's contradictory data. For the first time since papers had scattered around my feet, I felt something like hope. I arrived at Blue Summit at my usual time, 7:30 a.m., trying to maintain an appearance of normalcy. The facility was unusually quiet. When I passed Viveca's office, I noticed her door closed, but I could hear her voice rising in panic through the walls. What do you mean apparent plagiarism? That's ridiculous. I can explain everything. A pause. No, I don't need to postpone my presentation. These allegations are completely unfounded. I hurried to my lab, heart pounding. It was happening. The guild was questioning her. Within an hour, word began spreading through Blue Summit like wildfire. Petra slipped into my lab, eyes wide. Viveca's been on the phone all morning. Something about the guild requesting clarification on her research. She's livid. Do you know if she's still leaving today? I asked, carefully keeping my voice neutral. Her flight's at noon, but the way things are going. Petra glanced over her shoulder before continuing. The guild's questioning the originality of her presentation. Everyone's talking about it. Throughout the morning, tension mounted. Viveca emerged occasionally, shooting venomous glares at everyone she passed. Her phone rang continuously. Each time she answered, her voice grew more strained. At 11 a.m., she stormed into my lab, face flushed with rage. "What did you do?" she demanded, keeping her voice low despite her evident fury. I looked up from my microscope with practiced calm. "I'm examining the camembert cultures. Did you need something, Director Landon?" "Don't play innocent. The guild is questioning my research. They've received anonymous concerns about my presentation. This has your fingerprints all over it." I set down my pipette carefully. "Perhaps they're concerned about inconsistencies in your data? That happens when research isn't properly conducted." Her eyes narrowed. "You think you're clever, but you have no idea who you're dealing with. I built this facility's reputation. Who do you think they'll believe? The director or some lab technician?" "I'm a research scientist, actually," I corrected quietly. "And data doesn't lie, Director Landon. Even when someone tampers with samples." The color drained from her face. Before she could respond, her phone rang again. Glancing at the screen, she hissed, "This isn't over," before hurrying from my lab. At 3 p.m., something unprecedented happened. Marcus Wright, the facility owner, a man who visited Blue Summit perhaps twice yearly, arrived unannounced. He headed straight for Viveca's office. Through the glass walls, I watched their animated conversation. Viveca gesturing emphatically, Marcus's expression growing progressively darker. By 4 p.m., whispers circulated. Viveca's keynote had been suspended pending an investigation. The guild had contacted Marcus directly with their concerns. At 5 p.m., I received a message asking me to come to the conference room. Marcus sat alone at the table when I arrived, a stack of papers before him. "My research." "Miss Bellamy," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "We have a situation I need your help understanding." "Of course," I replied, trying to calm my racing heart. "I understand you've developed the techniques Director Landon has been presenting as her own," he said quietly. "The guild contacted me directly with some very troubling questions." I nodded, sliding across my original notes, dating back 2 years. Everything's documented here, including when my samples began showing unexpected contamination. Marcus reviewed the materials silently, occasionally making notes. After what seemed like hours, he looked up. "The guild is quite impressed with the innovation. Your innovation. They've asked if you might consider speaking in Director Landon's place." My breath caught. "In Lyon? At the Fromage Festival?" "Yes. They've offered to rearrange the schedule to accommodate you, should you agree." Through the glass wall, I watched as Viveca cleaned out her desk, face contorted with fury. Her assistant confirmed she'd canceled her non-refundable 5-star accommodations in Lyon. I would be honored to present my research, I said finally. Marcus nodded, relief evident in his expression. Excellent. The company will cover all your expenses, of course, and we should discuss your position here moving forward. I believe a promotion is long overdue. As I passed Viveca on my way out, she stood by the elevator, her personal items packed in a cardboard box. Our eyes met briefly. I could have said many things in that moment, expressed anger, satisfaction, or even pity. Instead, I chose words I knew would land most effectively. Some innovations age well, I said softly. Deception doesn't. The elevator doors closed on her thunderstruck expression. That evening, as I began preparing for a presentation I'd never expected to give, my phone chimed with a text from Petra. Check your email, now. In my inbox sat a message from Antonio Vasquez, president of the International Artisan Cheese Guild. Dear Miss Bellamy, after reviewing the evidence presented regarding your aging technique innovations, the Guild Committee unanimously agrees that your work represents a significant advancement in artisanal cheese production. We are honored to feature you as our keynote speaker at this year's Fromage Festival. Additionally, we would like to present you with the Guild's Innovation Excellence Award, previously planned for Director Landon. Please confirm your acceptance at your earliest convenience. Respectfully, Antonio Vasquez. I sat motionless, staring at my screen as tears blurred the words. After years of working in shadows, my innovations would finally be recognized, under my name. But something still bothered me. How had Viveca accessed my samples? Who had helped her tamper with my work? And most importantly, what other damage might she have done that I hadn't yet discovered? As I packed for Lyon, I couldn't shake the feeling that while this battle might be won, the war wasn't over. Viveca had connections throughout the industry. People owed her favors. What would happen when I returned from France? The answers would come sooner than I expected, and in a way that would make me question everything I thought I knew about Blue Summit and about myself. The following week passed in a blur of preparation. I rehearsed my presentation obsessively, refining slides and practicing responses to potential questions. Though vindicated, I couldn't shake the unease that clung to me like a shadow. Viveca's final glare haunted my thoughts. People like her didn't simply accept defeat. My flight to Lyon departed early Sunday morning. As the plane taxied down the runway, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. 3 days ago, I'd been collecting my humiliated research from the floor. Now I was flying to France to present that same work to the world's foremost cheese artisans. The Fromage Festival occupied a sprawling convention center in Lyon's cultural district. When I arrived, bleary-eyed from the flight, Antonio Vasquez himself greeted me in the lobby. A distinguished man with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes. Miss Bellamy, he said, extending his hand. Your research has created quite the stir. I've had producers from 3 continents requesting private meetings with you. As he led me through the bustling halls, I noticed curious glances from attendees. Word had spread about the last-minute speaker change. Will there be questions about why I'm presenting instead of Director Landon? I asked. Antonio's expression turned serious. The Guild has issued a statement citing unforeseen circumstances for the change. We prefer to focus on innovation rather than controversy. He paused before adding, though you should know that several producers have contacted us with similar stories about Viveca Landon taking credit for others' work. Yours isn't an isolated incident. This revelation sent my mind reeling. How many others had she silenced? How long had this been happening? My hotel room overlooked the Rhone River, a luxury I would have appreciated more if not for my mounting anxiety. My presentation was tomorrow morning, and despite extensive preparation, doubts crept in. What if Viveca had sabotaged more than just my samples? What if there were flaws in my research I hadn't detected? That evening, I received a text from an unknown number. Watch your back. V has friends everywhere. Sleep evaded me entirely. The next morning, I arrived at the venue 2 hours early to check my presentation setup. The auditorium could seat 600 people. I'd never addressed more than 30 colleagues before. As I adjusted my microphone, the doors opened and Marcus Wright entered. Miss Bellamy, he called, striding toward the stage. I flew in this morning to support Blue Summit's keynote speaker. His unexpected appearance startled me. That's very supportive. Not just supportive, strategic, he replied, his businessman's pragmatism showing. Your innovations represent significant value to our operation. I'm here to ensure everything goes smoothly. What he meant, I realized, was that he was protecting his company's interests. With Viveca gone, I had become Blue Summit's new asset. As attendees filed in, my nervousness peaked. The room filled quickly, standing room only. In the front row sat Marcus, beaming with corporate pride at his company's groundbreaking research. Beside him was an empty seat where Viveca would have been. When Antonio introduced me, the applause felt surreal. I approached the podium, placed my notes carefully, and began speaking about my passion for revolutionizing traditional aging methods. My voice trembled initially but strengthened as I delved into the science I knew intimately. The presentation lasted exactly 47 minutes. When I finished, the silence that followed stretched one heartbeat too long before erupting into thunderous applause. Questions followed, insightful and enthusiastic. Producers wanted to implement my techniques immediately. Researchers proposed collaborative studies. What I'd created wasn't just interesting, it was transformative. Afterward, surrounded by admirers, I caught sight of a familiar face at the back of the room. Petra had flown to Lyon. When I finally broke free, she embraced me tightly. "You were brilliant," she whispered, "but there's something you need to know." We found a quiet corner where she could speak freely. "After you left, I started looking into company records," she said, glancing around nervously. "Viveca's been doing this for years, not just with your work, with others before you. How did you access those records?" "I've been Viveca's assistant for 4 years. I have access to everything." Her expression darkened, including email exchanges between her and Marcus dating back 3 years. My blood ran cold. "What kind of exchanges?" "Strategy discussions, about identifying promising researchers, exploiting their work, and then discrediting them if they complained." She pulled out her phone, showing me screenshot after screenshot. "They were partners, Nora. Marcus knew everything." The revelation hit like a physical blow. While I'd been celebrating Viveca's downfall, I'd completely missed the bigger picture. Marcus hadn't flown to Lyon to support me. He was damage controlling, ensuring the company's reputation remained intact despite Viveca's exposure. "There's more," Petra continued. "After Viveca was forced out, Marcus started contacting other industry leaders, positioning himself as the whistleblower who uncovered her deception. He's rewriting history, making himself the hero, while setting you up as the next Viveca." "What do you mean? Your promotion?" "It comes with a contract that gives Blue Summit ownership of all your intellectual contributions." I saw the paperwork on his desk before I left. I leaned against the wall, mind racing. "Why are you telling me this? Why help me?" Petra's eyes welled with tears. "Because I was complicit for too long. Viveca threatened my job if I didn't help her access your lab after hours. I'm the one who let her in to tamper with your samples." She wiped her eyes. "I've been gathering evidence against both of them for months, waiting for the right moment. The pieces fell into place. The microbial analysis I saved, you made sure that one survived." She nodded. "I couldn't stop her completely without exposing myself, but I could ensure you had proof when the time came." That night, while Marcus dined with guild officials, celebrating Blue Summit's commitment to research integrity, Petra and I formulated a plan. We worked through the night, preparing for a confrontation I'd never anticipated when I boarded the plane to Lyon. The final day of the festival featured a roundtable discussion on ethics in artisanal food production. When Antonio asked for questions from the audience, I stood. "I'd like to address the elephant in the room," I said, my voice carrying through the hall. "The circumstances that led to my speaking at this festival instead of Viveca Landon." A hush fell over the audience. At the panelists' table, Marcus's smile froze. "While one person was caught attempting to steal my research, the system that enabled her deserves equal scrutiny," I continued. "With the guild's permission, I'd like to present additional information relevant to this ethics discussion." Antonio, sensing the gravity of the moment, nodded. "Please proceed, Miss Bellamy." As I took the stage, Petra distributed folders to key industry leaders and journalists in the audience. Inside each, meticulously organized evidence of a years-long pattern of intellectual theft orchestrated not just by Viveca, but by Blue Summit's leadership, with Marcus at the helm. Email exchanges, ownership contracts designed to appropriate researchers' innovations, documentation of at least 7 previous employees whose work had been stolen before they were systematically discredited and forced out. What we're witnessing isn't one person's ethical failure, I concluded. It's an institutional practice designed to extract value from innovative minds before discarding them. The question before us isn't just about cheese production. It's about whether we, as an industry, will tolerate predatory business practices disguised as leadership. Marcus lunged for the microphone, but Antonio intercepted him. Mr. Wright, in light of these allegations, the Guild will need to conduct a thorough investigation before continuing any relationship with Blue Summit. The room erupted in chaos. Questions shouted, cameras flashing, Marcus attempting to regain control of the narrative. Through it all, I stood firm, finally understanding that true revenge wasn't about destroying Viveca. It was about dismantling the entire system that had empowered her. By that evening, the story had spread throughout the festival. 3 former Blue Summit employees contacted me, offering to corroborate my claims. Industry leaders pledged to review their relationships with the company. The Guild announced the formation of an ethics committee to establish new standards for research attribution. As I packed my belongings, preparing to return home to an uncertain future, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Blue Summit shares plummet amid scandal. Board calls emergency meeting. Another text followed from Eleanor. University offering you research position. Full autonomy. Call me. A knock at my hotel room door revealed Petra, holding a bottle of champagne. I just heard from Antonio, she said. The Guild is establishing a research grant in your name for ethical innovation in artisanal food production. They're funding it with the money they saved on Viveca's canceled 5-star accommodations. We laughed, popping the cork and pouring 2 glasses. To justice, I said, raising my glass. To new beginnings, Petra added. 6 months later, I stood in my university laboratory, surrounded by eager graduate students. On my desk sat the first commercial cheese produced using my patented aging method, properly credited and licensed. The producer had sent it with a note, created with Bellamy aging technology. Revolution never tasted so good. My phone chimed with a text from Petra, who now headed the Guild's ethics division. Guess who I just saw working the cheese counter at a supermarket? I smiled, but felt no need to respond. My revenge hadn't been about Viveca's downfall, or even Marcus's disgrace. It had been about creating something they could never take from me again, a legacy of integrity that would outlast any attempt to erase my contribution. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of justice served. Have you ever had to stand up against someone who tried to take credit for your work? Share your experience in the comments below. Remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't what happens to them. It's what you build despite them.